Welcome to &DD, your go-to podcast for candid conversations. Dive deep with us into the heart of life's challenges, business hurdles, and the journey to better ourselves. Join us in exploring the art of living intentionally, finding balance, and enhancing not just your life, but your business and leadership skills. It's time to grow, to inspire, and to lead, &DD. Conversations that transform. Welcome back to &DD Season 5 podcast, and I'm Dave Evans.
And I'm Debbie Halls-Evans. Okay, Dave, so we are halfway through the book.
Cool.
And we've been sharing our guest interviews, and it's our week to talk about another chapter. And This week's chapter is about connected or cut off. Now, I'm going to do the same thing that we've done before. I'm going to fire a few questions at you, get your perspective.
Yep.
If that's all right with you?
Yep.
Awesome. Also, would just like to say that we're currently recording this sat outside in sunny Scotland in our garden.
Yes.
Which is pretty cool.
We certainly are fully connected.
Fully connected.
That's it.
All right. So, as we have done with all the others, we're just going to have a look at what this chapter is about and how it gets interpreted across leadership and your thoughts and your perspective on it. The first bit is how can we explore our part in being cut off, what that looks and feels like, and actually how that is in the real world.
Yep.
And then I'd love to have a chat around how do we stay connected or even start being connected if it's not natural for us, but two, the significance and importance in leadership. So where would you like me to start?
Well, I think first of all, accepting the fact that as humans, in the world of leadership or leadership, right, we've got to get past this fallacy that we all want to be connectors. Yeah. Right? Because we often, I can only talk for myself, right? I like connecting with people. But there are times where I really can't be bothered, and I'm not saying to anybody listening that I can't be bothered. I'm saying there are times when I feel like that. There are times when your own selfish needs of where you're at that moment in time stop you from having the desire, motivation, or inkling to want to get connected, which creates cut off by proxy.
Okay, that makes sense. So being in a place of also, if we think about selfish and selfless, what we've just done is that there is elements where we do need to cut ourselves off, to re-energise, to reset, to refocus, to just allow ourselves to be. True,
but it's not even that, Debbie. It's just sometimes as a leader, it's okay to acknowledge to yourself that you're either disconnected from yourself, therefore you're cut off from yourself, you're maybe having a day where things aren't great, or you sometimes just don't want to. Right? You could be in a job, you could be in a role that you want to have, but actually you don't necessarily want to do all the people things that go with it. It's better to admit that and to be better at being more functional than it is to pretend. Okay, all right, I like that. So let's talk about cut off a little bit more. In the book, you explain in quite a lot of depth around the different types of cut off that we can actually experience in leadership. So we'll talk about, I think what you've just highlighted is about being personally cut off. So it's either by choice or sometimes you're in a situation that you don't want to be in. But I think there's also health and all the impact that can have on us and how we actually need to care for ourselves and others. But also business and being very specifically targeted toward them. Now there is 10 big examples in the book of what that looks like. But I really just want to understand for you in business, and in a professional capacity, how can cut off ever be a positive, or it could be something that's useful, if at all? Well, I think in terms of business, I can only refer to, in the safest space, Debbie, some of my favourite sporting analogies without the sporting story. And it's where you've seen a talented player in any sport for a country, when the discipline or the culture of that team or country is more important than the individual, that player never gets to play for their country, right? So that's cutting off somebody that's got the wrong ingredients, the wrong behavioural set, the wrong attitude, the wrong values. There's no connection to what your business or team is doing. And actually, that's a positive cut-off. And you don't have to be brutal about how you do that. But it's making sure that the people that are on your team, are in your business, are connected to all of those same said things.
But how do you do that? What's the reality of that? Because ultimately we talk a lot about, as a business owner or a founder of a business, you are never going to have a team of people that feel exactly the same about your business.
Yeah.
Or even as a leader, we can get frustrated with our team because their energy is not the same, or they don't seem to feel the importance of certain decisions, etc. How do you actually do that in the real world?
Well, I think firstly, you've got to highlight what you've already said. A founder's mindset or an owner's mindset is always going to be different to somebody that works for you. What is an opportunity is the communication connection you can create. It's not actually being cut off, Debbie, so it doesn't actually link to the bit before, but it's like a solution to that problem. If we go back to cutting off for a minute, because we're actually talking about getting connected, how do you help somebody that works for you get connected to those things?
Well, it was a bit of both, really, because I think a lot of people do feel cut off in their roles. Mm-hmm. So whether it's, I'm a leader who is working with a team, I feel there's a disconnect between us, so I feel cut off. It could be my ego, that I feel I'm better than everybody, or it could be that I am not sure how to connect to people, so I am naturally cut off. It feels like, I'm doing a job and nobody else seems to want to be engaged in the same thing, so you do by default feel cut off. That's what I was attempting to explain.
Which you did, but the answers to get connected still the same though, right?
Yeah.
So therefore it doesn't answer your previous question, which was where is cut off a good thing in the business, right? So we talked about values, behaviours, the DNA, your culture. That's where it's good. If someone doesn't fit, then cutting off becomes a process. Not suggesting you have to do that badly. Another good example of cut off, being cut off, which is what you asked about, is where, let's say you're doing something new in a marketplace that no one's done before, and you need absolute belief and obsession and buy-in towards the thing you're doing that no one's ever done. You've got to be cut off from what the market says. You've got to be cut off from public opinion. You've got to be cut off from negative beliefs. What else is good to be cut off from? Negative beliefs in general. Do you surround yourself by mood hoovers? Do you hang out with people who take you down? Do you tolerate it? When people are building rapport negatively, from a connecting with each other perspective, do you stay part of that or do you cut yourself out of it? That's cutting off that's positive.
Yeah, but I also think that's a really good thing to explain a bit more when we talk about that. Because when we talk about, we hear people gossiping or we hear people using banter in a really derogatory way, we have to understand from a point is that person at some point is attempting to connect.
Yep.
What happens is the opposite happens. They then get cut off.
Yep.
Or it creates more of the issue or separation in those teams or leadership. All right, that's cool.
But let's pick on your banter commentary, because that's also really important. Not the banter is really important. It has its part to play in any team. Boundaries and banter go together. But the bit that people cut off from boundaries and banter, unintentionally in teams, is they forget to deal with the intention of the person. If you know that person meant absolutely no harm in that, then coach, educate, learn together, be supportive and do all the best things you can. But what often happens is you end up having a cut-off moment. Somebody said something they totally didn't mean, and then all of a sudden it's an absolute drama when you knew the intention wasn't something they meant. Now, do you see how you can end up cut off in that space? Now, you still have to have connective support systems depending on the subject, but with banter, we sometimes seem to feel like we should remove all of it, but not entirely. Banter with boundaries. We've just got to know where those things are. That's a whole other subject for a podcast, banter with boundaries.
Banter with boundaries.
Yeah.
But it is a very big topic, but I do think people are experiencing it more and more, and we do see it generationally that we have different understandings, so I do believe, yes, it is a bigger conversation. So let's explore now understanding that cut-off can happen at any point, in any part of our careers, in any part of our roles, and very clearly can happen easily in leadership. Let's look at the other side of that, and that's being connected with people. And one of the things that there's several things that you share and go into conversation with, but it's these 4 things that I really want to talk about is understanding the view of others. Mm-hmm. So, and I know you can explain that in a minute, the value of others. So not the value of others in the context of the value they're going to bring to you financially or anything. And also the skills around how to communicate better. And then my final one was I wanted you to have a chat around was actually being able to take and make the time to connect, and it be something that's a functional thing in your life. Sorry, the dog's trying to get up on the bed. So let's start with, how do we get connected and how do we build a better view of others?
I think getting connected better, first of all, you've got to accept that communication is a key skill to this, right? And it's not, the other thing that people forget about communication is they always think it's a communication to, it's a communication with.
Yep.
Massive difference. Communication with encompasses everything. It's your chats, it's your catch-ups, it's your formal meetings. You know, communication with sits in every one of those things, even if it's just how are you. But once you've got past the communication barrier and realised, you know, the amount of times in my career, Debbie, where someone has said to me, how many times do you think you should tell someone? The answer is still, however many times it takes, right? There's no number. There's no definitive end point. Because if someone's not getting a communication, it's either your fault or there's a competency gap somewhere that you just have to talk about those things, not the actual thing you're trying your best to communicate. But I think in the book, I particularly highlight a couple of things. First things first, you've got to change how you see the other person. Now, that sounds really mechanical. It isn't, right? I see people in businesses every day and every week staying on their map of the world, right? Which is an NLP reference phrase. The map of the world is you're stood on your map, seeing the world how you interpret it through your senses, and you expect everybody else to be on your map with you, but they're on their own map with their own version of the world playing out. And what we often forget is we've got to cross the border of our map and go into the other person's map and meet them where they are. Now, it's not about one way either. Both parties have to learn that skill, and it's becoming more and more important these days because you also now have a new map available to you, which is the power of new language through AI, which is all language cues. So your ability to see the world as the other person sees it becomes more important in both of those spaces as a result.
And this is why communication is overarching with anything to do with connection, is because it's not just the verbal and the semantics and the language element, as you said. It's the ability to be able to either ask really great questions to understand what that other perspective is, but also be willing to do it, because a lot of people aren't.
Yep. I remember sitting at a conference at a John Maxwell event many years ago. John Maxwell has written many leadership books, but talks about leadership is influence. And he was told by his dad, who was in his 90s at the time, he told this story from the stage. He said, my dad told me, he said, and I'm playing it back slightly inaccurately, Debbie, but informally on the podcast, son, you may as well work on communication because you're going to have to do that for the rest of your days, because at some point someone's going to think you're not communicating. So you have to keep working at it. And it's one of those lifelong choices. But if you're going to lead people and you want to be leadership, not leadership, owning the fact that you own your own communication is a key first step to connecting with others.
So there's a couple of tools that and techniques that are in this chapter. One is primary aim, which I'm going to come back to. But the other one is match plus one. And I don't want you to go into massive amounts of detail, but it is a communication skill and a technique as well. If there was one thing that you would want people to take away without actually going into the whole technique and spending a while on it, what is it that people can benefit by understanding matching versus mirroring? Sorry, I can't say the word.
Well, that's the first mistake, Debbie.
Yes.
You don't talk about mirroring.
I know, but that's what comes up first, though.
No, I know it does.
Yes.
And I know that's why you said it. But I'm saying this for the listener, not for you, right? You don't talk about mirroring. Right? Mirroring means I'm attempting to coerce you or copy you. To answer your question about what's the one thing about matching, to focus on matching means you have the single motivation of connecting, right? And I'm going to match without speaking your facial expression, and I'm going to join you where you are at. No words at this point. So you don't need to be charismatic. You don't need to be someone who's great at building chemistry. You don't even need advanced rapport skills. You're just going to focus on, I'm going to connect with this person where they're at right now based on what's on their face. And then I'm going to maybe start with hi or something like that. And you're going to be at the exact spot they're in. That's the best thing you can do with Match +1.
Okay. So knowing that this is about connected or cut off,
Yep.
what would be your overarching summary of why this is one of the key parts of leadership or leadership?
When people aren't connected, you're less productive, you're less efficient, you're less motivated, you're less in the moment, you're less alive. There is a huge need to do the opposite. And if you want your team to do things that are either significant or just successful, right? Or you want people to feel good enough going about their work today, getting connected is the glue that starts that process, allowing it to happen. It enables it.
So if I was to challenge you in regards to his different styles of people or how people deal with different scenarios, I would say that, and this is a personal perspective, it's easier to cut yourself off than it is to connect. Do you think that's true?
It depends, doesn't it? I don't think it is necessarily true for everybody.
Yeah.
Why would I want to be cut off from something? There could be a whole range of motivational programs running. You actually just might want to feel safe by taking control of something for yourself, which keeps you cut off because then you feel okay about things.
Okay.
Right? It could be because you want to hoard the result. You want to own the limelight. You want to take glory for something that you've been working on. It could be all kinds of things. So I think it's one of those annoying answers that I think it depends.
No, I think it's important because I do think, for somebody like me, I'm sat here in a field talking to you remotely. For others, this would be deemed as being cut off. So it's also that external perception, isn't it, for me, is that cut off has got to be, it's also a discussion point, is that, what is your definition of cut off so that I can help that other person and not assume, because I do think we can fall easily into the trap of assuming what that looks like for the other person because it's what it looks like for us. It goes back to your map scenario, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Just knowing that we really want to help people understand and actually apply some of this in their real lives, and we do ACT across the book as well. What can I apply, change, teach or transform? What would be your thoughts before we go into a little bit more of a summary in regards to is what would be the best way to change and support yourself to stay in leadership and not sit in the leadership elements of cut off or disconnected? Connected.
Connect up meaning to the things that you're doing. Now, meaning's a huge subject.
I was going to say, yeah.
Right? But there's primarily two types of meaning in business today, right? There's the company meaning and there's the person's personal meaning. So you want to connect up in both directions. So if there's something I want to achieve in my life and we've got a good enough relationship that you know about it, help me connect that up. Make the moments matter more. Even if it's just by 10%, you'll add more balance to someone's well-being in the process. And then for the company, meaningless tasks that have to get done still need meaning. And actually there's all kinds of trainings.
That is a chapter.
Yeah. There's all kinds of training stories about people building houses and and the meaning they attach to it, which story for another day. But I think for me is that meaning of the company and the meaning of the individual are the two start points for me that allow you to get started and immediately get better at this.
Okay, so we don't drift into another chapter.
Yep.
What I want to know is, and I want to understand, is if I was listening to this and I was working in a job that literally was just a job and my leader was demanding extra hours out of me, and actually I was just going to work to earn some money so I can go and live my life. Mm-hmm. Because that to me seems much more realistic in the realms of being employed, etc., is how does a leader not fall into default leadership behaviours, do as I say, just do it, get on with it? How do you stop yourself from going down that track and keep bringing people back to that central point of being connected with them, even when that person might not have that massive meaning, but also you just want them to do their role to the best that they can at that moment.
So you asked me more than one question. You asked me about, first of all, the first question was, what do I do if my leader is? So in that situation, is it the individual we should look at today, or is it the leader who's doing that? Because the leader who's doing that, demanding without tapping into meaning, is actually on the fringe of leadership. They're not actually applying leadership. At the same time, that person who wants to go to work and exchange money for time, they're entitled to do that, but there's still an opportunity for connection in that moment, should you choose to activate it or step into that space and do it.
So I was looking at more of the tangible elements.
Yeah.
As in, how does somebody do it?
Yeah. You've got to get to know your people. You've got to have a consistent approach to reviews. We talk about in my other book, Framework, about iChats. You know, what's your commitment to connecting with your people? And then staying regular. Having a different format for your reviews over time. Sometimes they'll just be about, are you all right? What's going on? You know, what's going on outside of work? Do you need any help? Other times it'll be a bit more seriously. But going back to the point you made earlier about working through a primary aim with somebody, working through your own primary aim, looking for those moments of meaning, but definitely for that person who wants to exchange. And by the way, the best meaning you might give them is to be able to come in, perform really well and leave. And you enable that process, that exchange for time. You just make it really engaging as part of that process.
Okay. All right. So we talked about primary aim. It is a separate product, and it is an actual program that we do, which can be delivered over 12 weeks. So that's separate, and I'll also put a link in. We are going to build an online course for that, Dave. Just
fantastic.
So you know. So there's 4 things that you talk about. Well, there's not. There's actually 9, but I've only picked out 4. Which are to stay connected and to ensure that you're aware of, are you cutting off, even if you're unsure if that's the behaviours, is think of the good first of an individual.
Yeah.
Apologise quickly is one on your list.
Yeah.
Is learn to be curious.
Yeah.
And accept feedback. And I think the one I'd really like, because you touched on it a little bit ago, is how do we accept feedback?
I think first of all, there is a really amazing technique that I learned years ago called thank you. And it's thank you as an answer allows both parties to have a moment to weigh stuff up. Feedback, again, if you are listening to this, I don't think the dog barking in the background will be picked up, but he spotted somebody visiting who's over in the distance, disconnected from us, but he's watching them nonetheless. Feedback, accepting the feedback, it all depends on the situation that you find yourself in getting feedback for. Is it your boss? Is it a peer? Is it developmental? Is it your coach? Is it a mentor? Is it someone you respect? Do you know their intention? But my number one tip for somebody coming to you with feedback is I would pay attention to perceptually where they sit. Are they on your shoulder? Are they in front of you, or are they behind you? Behind you is they might not see what you're looking at. So you've got to clarify, is the feedback right? In front of you, it's almost confrontational if they're facing you. But if they're on your shoulder, either side, they're looking at it with you. The perspective is, I'm here to help you. And if that feedback is about really helping you improve, helping a process improve, and has got really great objectivity in it, I think you should embrace it wholeheartedly. But I gotta come back to something that we talked about a little bit earlier on, only for a moment, is I these days find myself wanting to check the intentionality of feedback. Is that person looking out for my best interests as part of this process so I can connect to it? Because sometimes they're not.
Yeah, what's in it for them and not you.
Worse still, the feedback could be, you know, we can be really positive about accepting feedback today, but let's call out the other things that happen, particularly in large companies. People form perspectives of other people for them.
Yeah.
And the person that's got the perspective formed about them is the last person to know. So in that situation, if you're that person, the last person to know, you know, that's leadership. Let's not mince our words about that. they should be the first person to know, right?
Well, it also goes back to that point is that you do sort of apologise quickly and have good intention first. But I think accepting feedback is also delivering it timely.
Yeah.
It goes back to, to stay connected with somebody is telling them that a year later that actually, that project you did, it wasn't that great. What is the point of that? Because it adds no value and I know that I coach it this way, that feedback is a choice, right? It's a choice to accept, and it's exactly what you're saying. Is that person genuinely here to help me improve and to help me even understand that, this may have come across differently for somebody else? Or is that person actually going out of their way to spread ego, make me feel uncomfortable, hierarchy or whatever? We've got a choice. And I think I know from experience I've had with leaders is that when it's their opinion and you don't take that feedback on, you're the one that gets punished.
Aye.
And it's a definition of leadership, but it is also, it happens a lot.
The other thing, Debbie, is there are a couple of examples of this, but here's one of my favourites. The worst I've ever seen was a commission-based salesperson being in somebody's house selling home improvements, and I was watching in the research phase of a project we did years ago. And the actual manager was with the salesperson. The manager saw the salesperson making a mistake that ultimately cost them the sale, and then decided to let it happen to teach them the lesson afterwards. But nobody earned any money that day. And I've never forgotten it. Because actually what that manager would have won with is in that moment in time, if they'd interjected and won the business, and then really won, the other person would have turned the word won into own. They'd go, I saw what you did, I understand. And they wouldn't actually then make the mistake. Well, instead it created resentment.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and also I understand that person then goes into defence mode,
100%.
right? Because then they cut themselves off because they then disconnect from that person, and then their relationship's never the same after incidents like that.
Another feedback leadership is where you have maybe a manager goes on holiday, any type of company, and then the next level up tinkers with all the people in that team and talks to them and finds out and asks for feedback. I'm really sorry, but you're stirring the pot, right? Now, even if you need to do that, do it when the person's in. Do it when they're around, when they can look at you in the whites of the eyes that day. And the other bit you said I think is really valuable, and I think we should pause for a moment on it. If you're giving feedback that's out of date and isn't timely, you talked about a couple of months ago, we live in an age of technological communication opportunity that if it's a week old, it's out of date.
Yeah.
Right? If it's not today and you haven't done it today and you leave it till tomorrow, unless it's serious and it's competency and behavioural based, where you've got to think it through with another leader or another coach, and you're going to work it through as what's the best action. Outside of those exceptions, it's got to be instant or you got to ditch it. Because if you don't do it, it's on you.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, so this is a really good chat, so I've enjoyed it thoroughly and still learn something new every day. One of the things that we always share at the end of these episodes is the examples of what leadership is and leadership is. And this isn't, again, for anybody to sit there. It's for us to be more self-aware, because I think we all fall into some of these things. Are you reading them?
Yeah.
So, and I think for me, the stuff that you've put in here is really great. So leadership and to be connected is to work to a consistent story. And we know that this doesn't happen. This is really important. Remove guessing.
Yeah.
That's a sign of really great connected leadership. And practice. I think this is the word I really love, is practice, trial, test, work on it constantly.
Do it again. Don't quit in the first 10 goes.
And then leadership is to ask yourself any of these questions. Am I careless with my communication? Am I the one gossiping? Am I the one not calling people back? Do I not respond? Do I not follow up?
Yeah.
Being wedded, and I heard this the other day about somebody, it was a client I was coaching, and they were on holiday, but the boss still expected them to reply. What is that about? That person is entitled to a break from work, so they come back to work more effective. So it's also leadership, but it's also what we've got to remember is, if I'm the leader and I'm on holiday and I'm responding, I either set a precedent for everybody else to do that, or I give permission for other people to do that to me.
I have a different view, which is similar but not entirely different. But my different view is like this. That is a sample of someone else that's not right. It's not actually the problem. The problem plays out like you just described. The problem is, what process didn't work pre-holiday? What process didn't work in the business that made that situation arise outside of a financial governance and hygiene issue in your business? That's different, right? So if your business is in real trouble, there are exceptional circumstances, Debbie, where you'll be in that situation. But if it isn't that...
Well, they are very rare, those.
Yeah.
Let's
or
be
a
real.
security breach or a data
Yeah,
data
but the reality
attack
is, in
type of
most
thing.
companies, there is enough people, whilst one person is on annual leave, to be able to fix something and not disturb that person. You know, I love the French element, you know, that they can't email after 6 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's very draconian, but the point is that it's to prove a point. People are entitled to have a life after work, you know, it's important. The other thing as well, which you touched on before about do you ever, and on your self-assessment, is think and assume something is, and then also just continuously cross people's boundaries. And I'm a firm believer, one is it's so easy to assume something because it makes our life easier, and it means we're only sitting on our map. But I think the other thing about boundaries is we sometimes don't know a boundary is crossed until it gets crossed. So we don't know everybody's boundaries, and we sometimes don't even know our own. But that's not what leadership is. Leadership is continuously crossing boundaries when they are clearly defined.
Yeah, 100%. I think, Debbie, assumption is something we should all be working at, kicking to touch, because the older I get, every time I assume I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Every time. Without fail, actually. And people think I think people mistake assumption with intuition. They are not the same thing, right? And assumption, I have to say, almost every time is wrong. A gut feel is not assumption.
No, it's not. Yeah, I get that.
Right. So, and I think we sometimes get those two. There's one more cut off I'd like to just highlight, which you could get connected with. Do you know the thing that's a bit old fashioned, that it still blows my mind today? Is, you know, when you ring people's mobile phone numbers and there's no message. It's bland. It's the network message. Who've you called? Is that really you? Are you really connected to even your own phone? I think there's an opportunity for people just to say, yeah, this is me. You called me. You know, and actually, whether it's, I've heard some really good funny ones, even people who pretend that they've answered the phone on their voicemail. Or in fact, our son's done it.
Yeah.
And it actually is amusing till you do it the second or third time. But it's you know, I've actually had people call me, not realise that they've called somebody else, and tell them a whole problem before that person's then said, it's actually happened to me, right? Going, yeah, oh sorry, I think you should do it, but I'm not the Dave you wanted. So get connected to your phone properly, use it properly, names correct, information, data, but also on your voicemail message. When you ring and it goes to voicemail, have something to leave who you are as a brand standard. And also if you leave a voicemail, think through what you're going to say first. If I get to voicemail, and don't become a bambling idiot that you then say nothing on a voicemail. Say something with purpose so that person knows what to do afterwards. Because guess what? They won't call you back. They won't return your message because you didn't really say anything other than that you phoned them. And if you're a person ringing people that doesn't leave a clear instruction or action, then you shouldn't be expecting any phone calls back. Connected or cut off. Your communication's cut off because you're not actually doing it very well.
Which is really interesting, Dave, as a little bit of a mic drop is, you have a voicemail message and I don't.
That's very interesting, isn't it?
It is, yeah, because I actually turn off my voicemail so that people don't leave me messages, in the context that if I miss a phone call, I'll phone that person back. But I don't want to be in the position of consistently chasing up voicemails. So there's two interpretations of the same thing. If I miss a call, I then phone that person back.
Yep.
So, okay, cool. Anything else you want to add?
No, I just think that this is a very important part of the book. If you want to build great leadership and you have people in your business, being connected makes a better difference than having people who feel cut off. Thank you for tuning in to Ann.DD. For ongoing inspiration, follow us at Ann.Scott on Instagram and online. Keep going, keep inspiring. Until our next episode.